Alright, and for this character, I went and finished out all the fingers and got all the skirt joint chains put into place where they need to be. So she is ready to go into deformation pose. Let me go ahead and snap this off and turn off transparency. Now one of the things I want to mention too before moving on is be sure to save often when going through this process, because Maya, like everybody's probably experienced working with Maya, it tends to crash. And it does crash with the animation rigging toolkit sometimes as well. And if you're working on your character and it crashes, it won't save out this information. But if you save out just a general Maya ASCII file and you have all this stuff on here, it'll remember this. And if this next time you open that Maya ASCII file, it'll pull the file open like this. And all you would have to do is go to Epic Games Character Rig Creator, and it'll bring up the last menu that you're working on for that character. You can save out this template too, just like you did when you did your initial bone setups. Same exact place you would find that option for the button. Just go here, save template. Because I did this earlier, I just had a Alicia skeletal template. I want to save that out. I guess I want to override it. And what this does is it saves out all of where you put all your joint placements. So from there, we're going to go ahead and go to deformation setup. We do want to create a rig pose, so we'll place it into the T pose and just choose yes for creating that rig pose, and we'll save out our rig pose. Now it's going to ask us here, just make sure you push no when this comes up, because this is asking that proxy geometry that we're not even using right now. It's going to say, well, do you want to skin all that proxy geometry? If you didn't have a character ready to go, I mean, for something like this, you would say yes if you were using the proxy geometry, but in this case, we are not using it, so we'll hit no. And our character should be ready to go for skinning, so we'll bring that down and we'll turn off our reference layer so we can select the mesh. Right now we are selecting the joints. There we go. Go ahead and paint Wayne's. She has no skin cluster assigned, so here I think I'll do it the old-fashioned way since it's giving me this issue. I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna select. My joints are very small. They're hard to see. I mean, it's blue, but I don't know if you can barely see it through there. It's that purple lines going on. Let's go ahead and make those joints a little bigger. So if you are in the animation menu, you can come down to skeleton and just go down to, I'm sorry, it would be in display. Go down to animation and you'll find your joint size. From here you can increase your joints to see how big or where they are. I've got a tool I also put up here, so you can like just come to display, animation, hold down Control Shift, and if you click, it'll add that to your shelf if you use custom shelves. These are buttons I commonly use most of the time, so I set up my own shelf. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select that geometry. I'm going to go through, select that, and find that root. I'm going to go through the hypergraph to do this. Here's our model. That's all our controls. And there's our skeleton. You'll find your skeleton at the very end of the list. So these are all the joints that make up your skeleton from the art kit. So I'm going to go ahead and select that root joint. Actually, just to be safe, I'm going to select all these joints. And that root. Go ahead and close out that hierarchy. So all the joints are selected along with this too. And go ahead and go to skin, bind skin. We're going to do a smooth bind. Now we have a skin cluster assigned, so it won't give us that issue anymore. We can just start painting weights to this character. Maya will do its best to try to assign the skin weighting to all the bones and everything, but most of the time we have to go through and do it ourselves. Because I know I don't want the root to influence anything on this model whatsoever. I come through and I want to select, go to vertice, and I want to select all the verts. There we go. Those. Doing this so I actually have a list, and I'm going to completely eliminate any influence that root bone's going to give us. All I need to do half the model because I can always just symmetry the skin information over. Even has that option here in the art kit. Do so. Selecting individual vertices here within the skeleton, or within the mesh. Select the eyepiece. Alright, just like we did earlier, I'm just going to go through and just grow the selection out quite a bit. And I'm pushing this button a lot too to make sure I get everything selected. I missed that boot. I missed that leg. As well as that belt. Easiest way to tell is once I see all yellow everywhere, then I know I have everything selected. All the verts are now selected. I'm going to go ahead and go into the component editor. And what this does is it's a good way to be able to make sure you zero out bone influence on the mesh that you do not want. So from here, I'm going to go into Window. And in component editor. Try to remember where this is at. Bear with me for just 2 seconds. Alright, well, once I find the component editor, for anybody that does rigging, I'll go through here. I'm going to look for that root bone. It's clavicle, foot, hand, fingers, neck, pelvis, root. So I want to go through, control select. Whoop. Select that first one, go all the way down, select all that, hit 0. Completely eliminate that root because I do not want it influencing anything at all. Alrighty. Let's check one last time for anybody looking for that component editor. I apologize about this part. Okay, moving on. So from this skin cluster, I'm just going to go ahead and start painting influence. We're back to object mode. And you just go through and just start painting in the bones. If you do any skin painting, I mean, there's plenty of tutorials out there that show how to better define to go through all of this and paint skin weights to bones. I'm just going to go through and show you some of the extra options that I end up using through the art kit to do my better refinement of painting weights. And the biggest option I like the most is the ROM, the range of motion. If you come through here and then you want to try out, I guess the skirt, no, let's try out the spine because that's one of the first things I like to work on. You can select all three, and there's a way you can do so you can select individual ones as well. You can do solve as one item. It'll tell you the interval between frames. You can increase those, and you'll see differences happening down here. Let me expand that graph all the way out so we can see all the frames. And I'm going to solve as one item, so they'll all move as ones. And you'll see it had like a weird effect going on in there for a second. So I can close this out, and if I go back from 0, just drag through this bar, it'll show you how well all the skin weights are going that you've been painting and working on. So, I mean, for this spine, it actually came out pretty well. Just keep going through. Yeah. So her spine came out pretty well for just solving as one item. Now, if you're like, oh, I want to get rid of that animation and do it somewhere else, you just right-click on this to clear all range of motion keys, When you go back through, you will not have any keys on your animation, on your timeline. So I can do it for the clavicle and arms. Clavicle, left, lower arm. And I want to go ahead, let's do these ones individually. So I'm not going to solve as one item this time. I want to see every bone move on its own and what it's influencing around it. So I want to generate motion keys. It's quite a few motion keys this time because it's generating keys for each individual bone. So it's these 3 bones here. And already I could tell, like, I would have to go back and paint this to where I would want to get rid of influences on the hair and on the hat, because there's should be none for a clavicle bone like that. This could probably be softened out. There's their shoulder, and there's your forearm. So it's not as bad. I've seen worse. I've definitely seen worse. But definitely go through. It definitely needs to get cleaned up. I know the fingers will have a lot of fixing that will need to be done. I'm going to go through and I'm going to clear those range of motions. But this time I'm going to take all 3 of these. I'm going to solve as one item and see how that looks. So this time it's rotating and all. So if the arm goes down, you can definitely pick out what needs to be fixed. So for this wouldn't be caving in, so there'd be less influence that needs to happen from the arm. You'd be able to tell if you turned on, select your object to your paint weights. Come down, let's find our arms. Let's isolate these so we're not looking at everything, so we can shrink our list down. Let's not block that. Alright. But anyhow, we can see that we got some influence here that we don't want from the clavicle. Upper arm has influence that should not be going on in there, and the lower arm is not influencing at all. So that's pretty good. So for that clavicle, definitely gonna need to soften out. I'm holding down shift. On the add mode, like, you can go through and change your different values. You can flood it, which will flood 100% to whatever the mesh is what we don't want. But I'm holding down shift to smooth it out. It's kind of like ZBrush, where you're smoothing out your model. It's not doing enough for me. I need to really get rid of a lot of that influence. I'll usually come down to replace. And replace works sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So either from control to invert or shift to get rid of it. It's still smoothing. If I hold down control, there we go. Now we're getting rid of that influence. Just be aware of your settings on these, because sometimes it'll influence it to 0, which means that it won't have any influence on anything at all, and those verts will stay static. So I'm going to get rid of some of that influence. I'm going to add a little bit back with the shift key, holding that down. The shift is like the smooth is like a universal when you hold down shift. It works in both replace and add. So you don't even really need to click on smooth. You can, if you wanted to be 100% that you were not replacing it. Holding down control should give you the inverse effect of whatever brush you're using. I guess for add, because it doesn't have any influence down there, that's what's going on. And I want to assign more influence to the spine 3, and spine's usually going to be found way up here. Let's get past the skirt. Spine 1, 2, 3. I need to bring that way down. I like to use a stylus to do most of the skinning of the weights, because I have a lot more control than I would with the mouse. The mouse, it's 100% or it's 0, so you don't have as much control when painting weights. So for this part here, I mean, that's pretty good. I'm gonna fix that. I don't know why spine 3 is influencing the hair up there. I think that should be for the head. So we'll go down to replace, hold down control, and I want to get rid of all that influence. It's doing a little bit at a time because my opacity is down. I'm going to turn that up. Values kind of how much you want to take away or get rid of. I don't want any influence whatsoever within this area. Again, when you find the component editor, I have to remember where it is. I'm sure I will mention it here in a minute, because I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to do all the skinning for this character, and I will point out that part that I missed and what I forgot to mention. So I'll be sure to go through that again. But going through the component area, it would be easier just going through and just selecting all these verts on the hair and just assigning 0 to the bones that you know you don't want to have influence. The hood doesn't need influence there. Her hair could jiggle, but we don't need it to jiggle. And where's that clavicle? I'll get rid of that clavicle influence so we can start fixing this head and make it look a little bit more normal. You can definitely tell already that the upper arm there is influencing a lot of this. Get rid of that as well. And for your character, you would go through the entire character mesh and just do half this body for this character. Skirt, you'd have to manually go through, and then probably the same with the range of motions to give those a test. I want to try out the jawbone here. You select that jawbone. Let's I don't know if we can move the pivot point, but let's hold down the insert key. Oh wow. No, we can't move that pivot point. But we can rotate that head. Rotates everything along with it. This jawbone though, we can move up and down, but we're going to need a lot of work because that jawbone's affecting the entire face. Now for jiggle bone for the hood. That'd be cool, like if she jumps up and hits the ground, kind of jumps. You can add like a delay effect for that. But a range of motion is definitely a good one there. But I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and then I'll skin. And the next video, I'll come back and the character will be skinned, and I will mention any of the little tools that would be important before you move on to the next phase.